Festivus for the rest of us. It is time for the airing of grievances here to finish out 2021. And Jordan, who is in your crosshairs this week? Because it is a big name that you are about to put right in your sights.
A lot of problems with you people, and now you're going to hear about it. Saquon Barkley. I mean, how about, I just used the handy dandy Footballguys stat page, and I was just going down sorting. We have a new feature to it. It's points per game, so you can go through actually sort points per game right on the sheet. It's great. How about you have to go all the way down to running back 28 in terms of finding Saquon Barkley? You say, okay, well, there's a lot of excuses about, why he would be that low, a poor offense, a disappointing performance by the Giants at large. I could sort of accept that, but for the fact that he's underperforming Devontae Booker and all the key efficiency stats, right? Which really is the problem that I have with him. And then at this point, we've gone basically 2 years now without him making much of a difference. And then before that, he had his injury. I mean, we're at the point where now he's falling into the end of the where he probably should have been closer to last year. And this is a good example of we let all this time go by. And it was, it ended up being a spot where there was a massive fall there. If he didn't perform up to expectation, that's where we find ourselves.
Yeah, finding Saquon is like finding Forrester. It's like where you're just searching and searching. And yeah, it's been 2 years removed. And I think the difference between him and Christian McCaffrey is that McCaffrey has been productive when he's played. So you could say that he's lost 2 years in a similar fashion, injuries and things like that. But McCaffrey has been an auto start player and justifying that status when he has been active. That hasn't been a question mark for 2020 and 2021. So for Barkley, he's kind of drifting. And you've mentioned many times, whether it's on air or off, that there's a lot of risk. And I kind of mentioned before this year, Joe Mixon was like, is there a ceiling here? Well, we're seeing a career year. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a bigger ceiling. I said it was a critical year. If Barkley wasn't in a critical year in 2021, I mean, 2022 is it, right? 25 years old. And usually about 26, and for sure by 27, the age decline, no matter who you are, maybe Adrian Peterson didn't decline, but this is the time. And so he needs to put up or shut up. And basically the put up would be returning to running back one status is sort of minimum. And then having an actual impact like he had in his first 2 seasons on a per game basis. And I am one of the bigger Saquon Barkley fans. But 2 years in a row, and we've seen with guys like Juju Smith-Schuster and others, that is a long time in dynasty and fantasy circles.
Yeah, how about since Barkley's been back? So this is the past 6 weeks. He's averaged 11.3 points per game. Right there, dead smack with him, Devin Singletary, same age and everything. And so, if I told you were getting Devin Singletary production out of a top 10 running back, you'd be running to the hills. Now I get that his priors are really good. The problem with that is it was 3 years ago. And do we have a really, I mean, you're the comp guy. Do we have a comp of basically going 3 years without any resemblance of a ceiling where you actually get back to it? I was discussing this with someone this past week. Hey, he's still got, he's got 22 points per game upside. Like, that's entirely theoretical at this point. I mean, I don't have a good comp for someone making that rebound. We've looked for it for guys like Odell Beckham Jr. I know we're crossing positions, but it's really been a while. We don't have great comps for this. And it gives me a lot of pause. And, I'm not the big value player. It doesn't, value doesn't concern me all that much, but I'm looking for production and I just don't see it either. And I don't want to pay that cost for that production.
Yeah. And I think with Barkley, the 2 years in a row and during his prime, and again, I look at things on a per game basis. So this is not, Christian McCaffrey still finishes well in how I measure things because he's so impactful. It's adjusted points per game as I like to reference it. But for Barkley, 2 years as a running back one to start his career on adjusted points per game, but pretty much pulling up some comps. Eddie Lacy, obviously he ate his way out of the NFL, by this point in his career. Kareem Hunt is one that the first 2 years were far better than the next two. Let's see. Edgerrin James actually had a down before he got back. I guess if you want to squint your eyes, Edgerrin James would be a good one where he ended up churning out 3 more top 10 seasons beyond this point with a malaise for a couple seasons here, but it wasn't quite as bad. So Barkley would be a Edgerrin James minus, in terms of the downs were far more severe in Barkley's case here. But yeah, I mean, we've seen some cases like this. Have they popped back up for one season, maybe 2 seasons into the top 12, maybe. And that's kind of what we're hoping for with Barkley. One thing on his track is at least he has elite pedigree and elite profile when he was entering the NFL. We have seen it, and we can explain a little bit away. I want to see him look better, just independent of his situation. I want to see more pop plays. We saw it for a couple games early in the season, but this year is basically a lost one. And I mean, last week was a glaring case because you say, fantasy semifinals, you put in Saquon Barkley, and it looks like the game is completely lost right away.
Right.
Both him and the team. And it's just, and I kind of, you see that with Alvin Kamara, for example, with the Saints was also disappointing. And I think both of those guys are interesting lineup decisions. We don't really talk lineups a whole lot for Dynasty per se on the show, but I think week 17 is an interesting quote unquote start your studs, right? And obviously Barkley hasn't been a stud this year, but Kamara has been. Mm-hmm. And how low do you go before you say, well, I'm going to put him in, despite maybe having questions about who the quarterback's going to be this week and how that looks for the Saints, because Kamara has also not benefited. But Barkley is one that, frankly, you can't trust him at all for lineups this week, right? I mean, if he blows up on your bench, it feels like I'd rather just have Barkley play well. And if that means he's not in my lineup, so be it, to at least have a positive sign and a positive data point there going into my Dynasty offseason.
We have him projected at running back 22 in our consensus rankings this year. I mean, look at this.
Well, that means you're benching him this week, because if you're in the finals, what are the odds you're going that low at running back?
Probably, yeah, right. And we'll get to that in a second. But 13 for 46 and basically a third of a touchdown, and then we've got basically 3 catches for 18 yards. Really, that's putrid if we're being totally honest with ourselves. I mean, guys that might be in our orbit that are ahead of him. I mean, Josh Jacobs, we have as a top 10 play this week. Darrell Williams is a top 10 play this week. Heck, the aforementioned Devin Singletary, running back 12 projection this week. Heck, Sony Michel, top 15, a better ranking for Damian Harris, Chase Edmonds, Ronald Jones, Michael Carter, Alvin Kamara, heck, Cordero Patterson, right?
I was going to say, Cordero Patterson, you have to have a lot more faith in the big game factor. Like, who's going to actually score 20 plus and make a big difference? And the probabilities, we do the upside projections and things like that at Footballguys. Cordero Patterson has a very easy formula to a big game. And Barkley, it feels like it's been so long since we've seen it. And the offense, I would argue, is worse than Atlanta's. And Atlanta's is by no means good. So, I think a lot of those names, Ronald Jones, stronger offense, you figure more goal line opportunities. So that's where we are, though. That's where we sit. And frankly, unless you're starting 4 running backs, I imagine very few championship team participants here, game participants, are going to have to go down to Barkley in terms of, you have to have less questions about everybody, including Antonio Gibson and a lot of guys in that 10 through 20 range on our rankings this week.
Yeah. Hey, we got a good question in the chat room here, since we're airing our grievances. Who would win in a steel cage match between you and I?
What are the rules of steel cage? Are you up on? Is this you UFC?
No, just in a you put us in a cage and see who gets out first. I wouldn't. Yeah.
Well, it sounds pretty formal when it's like put these people in a cage. I mean, it's not like a street fight, so there must be some sort of. This is the thing where you can wrestle and kick and do everything, right?
Yeah, it's just full on. Yeah. First person out wins.
This is interesting. Like, let me ask you this: where are you on the rage scale? Like, if someone. No, could you pump yourself up to be truly like hurtful towards another human, like in a fighting type scenario?
Oh yeah, it probably wouldn't be you. But yes, I could. I could get because I wouldn't get mad at you per se.
It's hard for me to get to that space, so right. I think the whole thing would just be kind of a joke to me. Mm-hmm. So I would probably take that route. But man, if we got like Lord of the Flies type serious, if we got if we got survival of the fittest stuff, well, see, here's the thing. I always talk about, ways of survival if someone attacks you, like all these types of stuff. I'm going to do the dirty. I'll just tell you that right away.
You're the Dwight Schrute of that.
No, seriously. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to gouge your eyes out. I'll tell you that right now. You will not see. You may beat me, but you won't see straight for the rest of your life. I will grow my nails out, and the first thing, boom, right in there.
As you were raining blows
Right
upon
in
him.
Raining blows upon him. Exactly. Can I just get one good shot to the pupil? That's all I'm trying to do. And then I would just be like pressing on you very, like, even if you tried to choke me out, like I don't know. I would be doing crotch stuff. I would be trying to have your arm go asleep with your main arteries. Like I would be doing all that kind of stuff.
Got it.
Subversive behavior. That actually might be my nickname for the steel cage match. Subversive behavior.
It's a good fantasy team name. Team name.
I will say neither one of us is overly, like, you are high on the cardio scale in terms of when you exercise. Like you're not a big, like, you don't strike me as a big like weights guy, right?
No.
Yeah. So I would imagine of the two of us, I do more weights.
Probably.
So who knows? And you've been shedding pounds, just to shout out you. I mean, the last couple of years, right? You've gone a physical transformation, just to give you a heads up going into New Year's. Yeah.
It's easy to ride up a hill if you weigh 40 pounds less. So yeah, that's what we're
talking about, mass and force and all these Isaac Newton sort of phrases with me on after hours. So let me ask you this. What are your tingly spidey senses saying about Saquon Barkley coming into wedding season, as I like to call it, which is startup draft season?
I mean, there's going to be a whole bunch of guys in a range with him, and I think that if you put, and I don't even know if Swift is going to fall there. I mean, maybe Javonte Williams is going to fall there. I mean, we'll just set aside for a second Taylor, Najee Harris, Swift, and Javonte Williams. Just set them aside for a second. McCaffrey probably belongs in a tier of his own, sort of up there as well. But setting those five aside for a second, from that point on in the draft, I think you're going to get from 5 to 20. You have a lot of overlap. Yeah, you've got. I mean, you can have. I mean, you could pitch me on Dalvin Cook being right there next. You could pitch me on Dalvin Cook being 10 spots later, right? You could pitch me on, depending on his contract situation, this is going to sound outrageous, but you could pitch me on Fournette ahead of a lot of guys in that range that might not necessarily seem that way. Like we could get to April, Fournette's got 2 years locked in, and all of a sudden, like, I mean, he's looking.
Well, you have to view Fournette. You have to view Fournette in the same bucket as all those other hyper productive 26 to 28-year-olds like Zeke and Kamara and Eckler and Dalvin Cook. So you have to, so all those, he could join in that similar bucket for sure.
Right. Could you, it's funny because everyone poo-pooed Fournette, right? And all Fournette has ever done has been productive in a kind of an ugly way. It has never looked, you wouldn't put it on a poster, right? You wouldn't paint it on a mural, but he's been productive. And all Barkley's done since really that rookie year has disappointed in pretty ways. And it's really interesting how we think about the two of them so much differently. And I understand that there's a longevity issue with Fournette, and for me, it is contractually, there's nothing committed to him. Who is to say what he's going to be next year? All those things, right? But if he signs, I don't know, 3 for 20 with Tampa, I mean, that puts him in a whole different tier. At the position that he's not, like
a 3-year deal that's really a 2-year deal in practice, but it's tying him to Brady. It's tying him to the same continuity and infrastructure that currently exists. And a couple years, like you said, locked in like that, 27, 28-year-old seasons, that, other than the rookie contract guys like Javonte Williams and Najee Harris, those types, there's not a lot of insulation there. I mean, you figure Jonathan Taylor's not getting away from the Colts anytime soon, even though he's entering only year 3. So he still has 2 years rookie deal as well. And maybe he gets a deal, after the next 1 year. But I mean, it's a very short list on guys that have multi-year allegiance from their current team, where pretty much they're locked and loaded.
Especially second deals. Right. When you look at all these second, I went through the whole series and I was prepping, stuff for articles in the off season, and you go through all these contracts. I went through like every team, and I literally spent like a couple of weeks doing this, and it was all, I mean, they're all 1 year with, some guarantees in the second year, like the Aaron Jones. The only thing really guaranteeing him in the second year is the cap hit, right? There's no guaranteed money in year 2 of that 4-year, $48 million deal. A lot of them are structured like that, more than we ever talk about. And so when you actually look at these deals that were like, hey, it's, a 5-year deal or whatever, outside of Zeke, none of them actually are that. And so I think, when you look at these guys, it might sound crazy. Hey, we're looking at Fournette in a 2-year window. Like, there's nothing to say that Barkley has more than a 2-year window sort of opened up in terms of any sort of security at this point. There's just not. And so when you look at these guys, 2 years is a lot of commitment on a second deal. So.
Yeah. And Joe in the chat says, I didn't know playoff Lenny counted for all of 2021. Great point. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. He's been a monster this year. And unfortunately not around for the end of it, but we say puzzle pieces, and that's really what it's all about. I mean, a guy can get you all the way here, and then it's someone else who takes you all the way home. I was thinking back to our Tim Hightower discussion, was that 2 or 3 weeks ago, and, thinking through the scenarios, the possibilities this week on who actually qualifies. For example, Darrell Williams to me does not qualify. This is not a Tim Hightower situation. He's been a streaming guy previously this season, and he is a very predictable, saw it coming type scenario when he did see his previous start. And then this week when he's in my opinion, a top 10 play, good luck keeping him out of your lineup. But in terms of other depth charts, the closest thing I came up with for this week, the perfect storm, might be Boston Scott.
Scott, yeah.
That might qualify if he gets the inside straight and Jordan Howard does not end up playing, which he's dealing with a stinger. Those can be tricky. Those can be multi-week or even a month or longer, depending on how that goes. We saw, it just radiates, down to your shoulder and your neck and all that kind of stuff. So that would probably be the closest thing. And Boston Scott's been dynasty relevant before, but auto start, plug and play, and at a critical point, I think he most qualifies. And who knows, we may not know this until Saturday or Sunday, because if someone ends up popping COVID, it could be an injury away option that we aren't thinking about. I actually thought about the Patriots because Ramondre Stevenson may not be back. And then you're Harris, and then it's Brandon Bolden. So Brandon Bolden could technically, there's avenues for a lot of these depth charts for the number 3 guy, especially if one of the top 2 are already out. That could be the Tim Hightower scenario. And that's why, we're in a league together, and you actually took me out this past week, so we'll at least get some representation.
It wasn't pretty.
In the title game. It was not pretty. Yeah, I think the other side, they outscored us like so easily. But
there was suffering that happened. Yes,
what I've noticed seeing some of your waiver moves over the course of the year is that you're always thinking about the next, the possibilities later in the week. So like you take a shot on, JJ Taylor. You take a shot on like, it's probably not going to happen. But if it does, and I think this is the perfect week to do that, of saying, hey, who could be an auto start if this one thing happens, or if there's a COVID spread of the position group and one guy survives. And that's why running back is really get lean and mean everywhere else. And you can always pick up a wide receiver that's going to be plausible later in the week if you have to break glass and it's an emergency type scenario. But running back is the one that you may not be able to beat somebody to the waiver wire for the first come, first serve pickup if it comes out Friday, Saturday, that, so-and-so is out, but then also someone else is, didn't get back from the COVID list or whatever it is, that now you have the clarity and this is the signal, Jerry, this is the signal, and you put them in your lineup. And that can be the difference between first and second.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jarrett Patterson's another name there. If you get something from Antonio Gibson with this lingering injury, he's one that could potentially be, hey, heck, if you want to go super, super deep, Jake Funk might be your 1 week injury away guy for the Rams. It's not a great matchup against the Ravens, but again, if you want to get, go real deep,
let's get nuts. Let's
get absolutely crazy. Let me just run down just to give you an idea. I mean, we talk about team building all the time. I think this is just incredible when you look at what happened, just look at what happened last week in terms of who were the guys that actually were the top scorers at the running back position. Justin Jackson, this is incredible. Justin Jackson, Joe Mixon, who no one thought had ceiling, running back 2. Rex Burkhead, he goes 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's running back 3. Damian Harris 4, Nick Chubb 5. Again, people question his ceiling. Chase Edmonds comes back from injury and has a spot start.
And Connor doesn't come back. Yeah,
correct. Yep. David Montgomery, who was again a volume guy, not a ton of ceiling. He's a top 7 guy. Sony Michel, who was basically the third choice for that running back position for the Rams by the
Please
time
say
week
Rashad
16
Penny.
rolls around.
When's Rashad Penny? When can I get all excited?
Rashad Penny number 9.
Yes.
Rashad Penny number 9. Devin Singletary number 10. Zeke 11. Ronald Jones 12. Right. So when you look at those guys, this big, and think about this moment when you're sitting there in August next year and someone's telling you can't compete unless you draft a running back early, right? You go and just play
and that
volume.
you have to have all your flexes as wide receivers, and you have this long lens for your dynasty team because you go 7-8 deep at wide receiver, and you're like, but it's a start 3 with a flex.
Right.
Like I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't need 8 guys. And that's why, but every guy you mentioned, it's interesting, but between Burkhead and Ronald Jones and some of these other options that you've had chances to get them. Like
Burkhead was available last week.
He was on waiver wires, but we saw signs. Like if you pay attention to how that depth chart was trending, Burkhead outsnapped David Johnson before he was gone.
Totally.
So, and Philip Lindsay was not in the picture. And then he ended up moving teams, like and then Mark Ingram was gone. Like we had so many signs of like progressively building towards that moment. It wasn't going from running back 4 to 1 on the depth chart overnight. And that's why it's so important to track these things, because Ronald Jones, he's always been an injury away. Always. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, and one thing you said to me, and it kind of shook me out, because I was going to say on that Tim Hightower show, I was going to say Deion Jackson over there with the Colts, because and you were like, if Jonathan Taylor's out, Marlon Mack is going to get the call up from AAA, right, and he's going to go from healthy scratch to 15 plus carries. And it's just a good reminder that out of sight, and Zach Moss would be the same way, right? I mean, a guy that goes healthy scratch, but he doesn't play special teams. But when he's on the active, he actually is relevant. So all these depth charts, it's important to look at where we could be going. And Ronald Jones is just a good example of, he's not getting a lot of work. Oh, Leonard Fournette's great and all this stuff. Well, what happens when he's out? That's always the key question. Was Giovanni Bernard going to be the guy? I don't know. We'll never know how many targets he would get, but certainly Brady would have probably utilized him in that trustworthy pass catching running back standpoint. But that injury away, especially on stronger offenses, is hyper valuable.
Right. And especially when you look at the matchups this week, I mean, Buffalo's a 2 touchdown favorite against Atlanta. The Buccaneers, huge favorite as well this week. And so you look at these things and you're like, okay, like you're going to get a spot start of Ronald Jones in a glorious situation. You're going to get
multi-touchdown upside possibilities,
totally.
25+ point possibilities. Right. And Brady still doesn't even like him in the passing game. And there's still that upside possibility just by playing the Jets and likely positive game script. So
totally.
All right. I want to remind you, this is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 84, the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And we are sponsored once again this week by Props Fantasy. It's easy to join, easy to sync your leagues from Sleeper, Yahoo. You create those challenges, and it's using your existing rosters. So even if you lost a week or 2 ago in the playoffs, you're out of it, you can still challenge your friends, your league mates in matchups with your existing teams over there at Props Fantasy. What are you waiting for? Sign up with propsfantasy.com/guys to cash in. Give us the credit there as a warranted sponsor. And the registration also gives you a chance to win that signed Aaron Rodgers helmet. And the more challenges you enter, the more chances you have to win. So let's talk about some dynasty trading here, because Jaylen Waddle, interesting case here. Dolphins obviously cashed in to move up, get Jaylen Waddle. They're getting some early dividends there. Maybe more questions about Tua than Jaylen Waddle. And my more question about this, it's super flex, and Waddle was traded for a 22 first and a 22 second. And my biggest question here is, how high does that pick have to be? Because Waddle has passed so many barriers in year 1 wide receiver, shedding off a bust projection, and then pretty good to auto start weekly. He's gotten way up the food chain with elite pedigree right away. And so the macro question here is, how high does that pick have to be? And should you just be holding this type of profile post year 1?
I mean, he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver in dynasty rankings coming this offseason, right? I mean, it's almost like with his combination of age and production in year one.
Well,
Like
why is there no wide receiver one overall? If 2020 conversations continued, it seems like that should have been a talking point. But I guess Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, there's a bunch of young wide receivers producing to a requisite level to, I guess, make that challengeable.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, like I mean, we could put it on a list of who's the clear cut one on their team. Jefferson qualifies, I think Chase, but that's close with Higgins. I mean, Higgins and Chase are very close.
I still think this Chase greater than Higgins thing is. I want to know what that startup spread is going to be, because the assumption that it is Chase and don't even bother knocking on the door of what if it's T. Higgins is, to me, misguided. Because Higgins is good in his own right, and he's got 2 data points going, and he's had plenty of games where Chase has been a relative shadow in the offense, and Higgins has been a monster.
I was talking about this today. Is if you're a big believer in Burrow, easiest way to get exposure to Burrow is to buy Higgins at a discount, because there's going to be rounds of difference on him and Chase. They're basically, I mean, they're pretty close to being the same target share. And I don't think they're worlds apart, especially when you get to this point in the NFL where you're a couple, he's got a couple seasons in, he's sort of established himself as a 22% target guy, right? Like it takes a lot to open up a big difference on that. And if it's going to be rounds and rounds of difference, I mean, that's a clear buy, and you get to basically get really cheaper exposure to to Joe Burrow than you would have to spend as a top 15 pick in Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow himself. So I think that's a way that I would go about it. And I'm a big elite quarterbacks guy. Like it's an easier shot to take on an elite quarterback with Higgins there as a discount guy.
So back to Waddle. I mean, how if that was 101 in Superflex, would you rather have 101, 201?
I mean,
is Waddle a pivot guy ultimately?
I mean, I look at what he did this year, and that's a huge. Right, I think you have to, when you see what he's done this year, you definitely have to take, you have to update your view of him, right? So this isn't he was the worst wide receiver in the first round of the class, or second worst, I guess, behind Tony. Which funny how that turned out. You have to update it with like, okay, that's where he was. Now we have this massive new set of information in a whole new different situation where he's performed way above expectation. You have to update to that. And so, I mean, I don't, if it was 101, I would take him over any wide receiver in this class, given what we know about him. And then, I mean, the question is, do you want the liquidity of the 101? Can you put, the 101 with something to get, I don't know, Mahomes or something, or, to take an elite step up the board that you couldn't do with Waddle itself, right? I think that's a question of marketability would be my issue. I mean, if it's just blatant production, I think he's on board with the 101, especially in a class that doesn't have a great quarterback. And I'm not sure how high of a running back we're going to get either.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to get a first round running back? I mean, that would be the question that I would have in this.
Yeah, I'd probably put it at maybe 35, 40%.
Okay. What do you think the chances there's
more
two
likely
of them?
not?
Like 10%?
You mean like this past year? Yeah, not overly high. Not overly. Again, I like the players. I like the players that are out there, but we've seen. I mean, again, Jonathan Taylor didn't go, so I mean, it's a very acquired taste and situation for what running backs and what teams are in that zone to actually pull the trigger. But yeah, it's not one of those, oh yeah, there's a top 10 to 15. So that automatically raises the risk because you're cutting the round in half or more by doing that. Yeah, I mean, Waddle's such a dense hit track that it's pretty risky to fade that. I would say, we kind of talked about doing the 2 or 3-way go possibilities in previous shows. And, Waddle offers that possibility of saying, you could get a lot of toys. You could probably get a high first plus, a wide receiver that maybe could pace him for the next couple of years on the older side. Those types of situations are pretty appealing as well, because then if Waddle doesn't become, the oracle, the just plug and play every single year from now forward, then you can win that deal pretty easily if there's any sort of drop off, or if you just look and you say, well, competition for targets was pretty minimal this year, or who knows about Tua, there could be a quarterback change, or I don't know. There's lots of possibilities there. All right, next deal. We've got 14-team non-PPR. Wrap your brain around that. It's 1986 as well. Ronald Jones and Gabriel Davis and pick 27 in this coming draft. So a very late second for Ronald Jones.
I'm assuming that's a contending team right now. Is what I'm assuming that person.
Ryan Rojo for this week and the possibilities in the future.
You're not getting a core asset with the pick. I mean, I think Davis is interesting, but I don't think ultimately he moves the needle. Listen, if you're Ronald Jones away from winning a title, do it.
Well, and let's face it. I mean, the likely outcomes in terms of high impact is Ronald Jones has higher odds than Gabriel Davis, who has been ancillary wide receiver so far. He's day 3, and he's been a success within that prism. Totally. But there's no guarantees he's ever even a definitive lock and load wide receiver 2 on his depth chart for an entire season.
Right.
So high risk. Gabriel Davis is like the poster child, right? It wasn't last January where he was like an early second round valuation. And it's just, that's so ripe with risk.
Yeah.
The assumptive young wide receiver with minimal pedigree that they're ever going to, and non-PPR, again, generally running back. I know Gabriel Davis that scores touchdowns. It's probably a better format for him than PPR, but
in that format, Ronald Jones has got running back 1 upside this week. You know what I mean?
Right.
That non-PPR for sure.
Yep. And this one game, I think this is an Adam Harstead topic, but if Ronald Jones comes up big this one game, that might be more impact to your team than Gabriel Davis for the rest of his career.
Correct.
Right? I mean, that's absolutely possible.
And you got it exactly when it matters, right?
Yeah.
If
you bought it the week before, now if Ronald Jones is not playing, then all bets are off. But
now we put the kiss of death on him. He's gonna be on the COVID list tomorrow, right?
You're dealing with as much known as you possibly can, though, with knowing Leonard Fournette is out, knowing it's clarified. You've got the choice matchup. You've got everything. I've got it all. George Costanza like. So same thing, 14-team non-PPR. Brandon Ayuk and a mid-second for Terry McLaurin.
What do you think on McLaurin? What do you think on how much do you trust Ayuk? I guess would be my question here.
I have them very close in rankings. I would take Ayuk in the pick. I know that pick in 14-team mid-round. I mean, you're talking 20s, right? 20 to 22, somewhere in that range, maybe. I get it, but that pick still has decent value. I know running backs will probably end up generally just going in a format like that, but you have outs with that pick. So I think the add-on is the most important part because I have them relatively close. McLaurin, we keep talking about, we'll wait till he gets a quarterback. Okay, I will wait. I will wait because McLaurin is good enough that you figure Washington's not going to let him go, right? I mean, he's going to end up being around. And do you trust that franchise? They've been lost in the woods for a while at quarterback, and there's really no end in sight. So that you can say, well, he just needs a quarterback. Situational change. Well, quarterback's the one thing that's difficult to fix. We're not talking offensive line. We're not talking, he's got an impending free agent as their number 2, and he's probably going to go. And like that, we're not talking about that stuff. You need the quarterback. You need the pivot man. They don't have it.
I mean, we don't know if San Francisco does either.
I was just saying I like Ayuk the player,
right? And
frankly, on a per game basis, I believe Ayuk's rookie season was better than McLaurin's ever done. He was I want to say Ayuk was in the mid-teens, and McLaurin is in the 20s.
Yeah.
Anyway, vamp on me, but I'll look that up. But I believe that's
no, that's fine. I mean, here's my concern about Ayuk is ultimately that we have this big issue that happened this year. We don't have a good explanation for it, and it gives me a lot of pause. And you have what I think is a very stable asset in McLaurin, and we kind of know what he is at this point. And we're dropping from him to a guy who I'm not sure what Ayuk is. Right. I'm not sure what the
for
payoff
a
is with the
mid-second
pick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So that would be the flip side of that.
Okay.
You know, I understand the pick, right? And I think it matters kind of what you do with that pick. If you're going to sit there and pick with it, I think I'd rather have McLaurin. If I'm going to sit there and use the pick for another purpose, like if given the choice between Ayuk and McLaurin, I'm taking McLaurin, and I'm not sure that pick moves me a whole ton.
I got you. Yeah, that's totally warranted there. Yeah, and the other variable is Deebo Samuel. Is he going anywhere? You know, so what's the path to? I mean, McLaurin has already been and projects for next year as being the wide receiver one for that team.
Totally.
So I would say the floor is definitely higher on McLaurin because he's been a pretty sturdy wide receiver 20 to 35 guy without the quarterback, without some of these other niceties at the position. All right. A reminder to sign up for that free daily email update from Joe Bryant, delivered every night to your inbox, and critical times. Week 17. I mean, what bigger stage you're playing for? Top bragging rights there in your league. First, and there's a big drop to second. And we know from last week, playing that third place game, kissing your sister, right? I mean, that's we're playing for something, but it's nothing like playing in the championship. So you can't let any stone go unturned, like Isaiah McKenzie last week, or just developing situations as we talked about. So you can go over to Footballguys, and it's the right corner of the homepage. Your league mates have it, so you better have it too. Make sure you're getting the same information, no tactical advantages left unturned for you versus your league mates there. So it's a free email update from Footballguys. Got a few thought-provoking quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum this week. My quarterbacks are Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. Guess which one I started today?
I'm going to go with Herbert on that one if you're asking.
Ding, ding, ding. Correct. Yeah. That's a tough one.
Hey, you want to hear the flip side of that? You know how we were just talking about the running backs, about how all the not good ones, the quote not good ones, played really well this week. How about the quarterbacks that finished at the top? Burrow, Prescott, Allen, Mahomes, Kyler, and then Zach Wilson was 6.
And but Prescott did that in a half.
Right.
How nutty was that? This was like Tom Brady in the preseason. He threw 35 passes for 300. He had like 350 total yards.
Yeah.
In the first half, and then that was it.
Right.
That was it. And some Dak Prescott, like I think I would have won one of my matchup if Prescott had played a couple more legitimate drives.
I had like 4 games that came down to basically how good Prescott and Cooper performed for a variety of different things. And it was like I needed 10 points all the way up to needing like 64 to get a win out of the two of them combined. And I basically swept the floor, and then we were sitting at that I got basically all the way up, and I was within shouting distance after they scored that touchdown where Dak threw it to Cooper. I was almost there, and then they had the blocked field goal where Court blocked the punt and recovered it for a touchdown, and then the offense didn't come back in, and I was like, no, that could have been the opportunity, but yeah, I mean, to even have that being a shot was. I mean, it's just the elite guys at quarterback can move that needle for you, and like there's a massive difference between being elite and being very good, because you have an extra gear that you can get to and make that big of a difference in a game.
I don't know how people do it every week of the fantasy season, because I just tuned in. I knew I had 3 games that were up for grabs still with midway through the fourth quarter there of the Dolphins and Saints game. I put on the game, and I was box score watching. What do I need? Looking at game script, looking at how the game's going. I don't know. I think there's people that do that every week.
Oh,
there's people that know, like week 6, they know what they need, and they live and die by what's going on late, on a Monday night kick or whatever. And it's just, I'll do it semis, I'll do it finals, just because I have such a, less of the full portfolio, and it's trackable and stuff like that. But man, the people that do that every week, it is Godspeed. I salute you. Out of five possible flex starts, I picked the worst. That's impressive.
I mean, this is why we're here airing grievances, right? These things happen.
Yeah. Get the aluminum pull out of the crawl space.
Yes.
Looking to flip Amon-Ra St. Brown off his hot month. Where is his value?
That's a good question. I mean, this is the problem with guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're a success track on day 3. Good year. I mean, in north of 30% target share in the last 3 games, and now you're going to come into an offseason where your team has high pedigree. You're going to probably be going through a quarterback.
There's going to be lots of Amon-Ra St. Brown owner sweats,
right?
Is what I'll say, because day 3, and you look around saying who else was there to take targets,
right? Hawkinson out, Swift out, right? I mean,
and then everybody else. Honestly, the rest of that wide receiver depth chart, I wouldn't be surprised if they're all out of the NFL by 2024, 2023, actually. Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of nomadic guys.
Right.
So, yeah, a guy that had a good productive track record, a decent profile coming out of college, yeah, he should be able to walk in and later in the season have that job, considering all the circumstance. Should. Right. But I think it's going to get a little too hot. I think he's going to get too hot under the collar. I think some people are going to be drafting him in the top. I mean, this is just top 35 or 40 of the position, which I think
I think it'd probably be even higher than that, I would imagine.
Higher than that?
It's a clear void, right? I mean,
good Lord.
I mean, you think he's
going to go for
top
first?
6 the past month?
You think he's going to go for he's going to go for a first?
Yes. Wow. I bet you people will pay first. I bet you can get a first for him.
Well, he was getting hot enough. He was going later second, right? In a decent number of rookie drafts. So that is profit margin, but man, that later second was an aggressive price point for day 3 wide receiver.
Totally.
But it paid off. In spades, because the Lions were sneaky decent, and they had nothing else at wide receiver, and they had a litany of injuries. And they're basically using him. They're using him a little bit as running back too, like a hybrid player, like all over the formation. That, I mean, he's a homeless version of Deebo Samuel and Cordell Patterson, and it's not even particularly close. Yeah,
I mean, listen, if Minnesota knew how to defend at the goal line and like we'd probably be talking about a whole different scoring system here over the past month. But I'm totally with you, and he's the perfect one to just hey, take the profit on. And the question I would have after this is, after this year, when's he going to make a difference? When's he really going to move the needle for you? And I wouldn't ever feel that confident.
Just realize that the next actual bullet point moment for Amon-Ra St. Brown is week 1 next year. And that's a long offseason. For a guy like St. Brown, that is a long offseason.
Right.
All the chatter you're going to hear, they're going to do something. See, that's the problem. It's not like he has a couple of nice wide receivers on the depth chart where you can say, oh, they might be status quo. They might just sit there. They might not do anything. Yeah. No, they're doing something. And it's just a matter of how bad is it going to be? It's almost like you're a kid and they say, wait for your father to get home. And you're just sitting there and you're like,
this is going to be bad.
How bad is it going to be? Right. Or it's just like, oh, we'll talk when you get home. And the whole time you're on the way home, you're just like, am I grounded for the weekend or a week or a month or the rest of my life? Or am I not going to be able to get my driver's license ever? Am I going to have to live at home till I'm 30? Like, you don't know the possibilities here. So that's what Amon-Ra St. Brown is. Like, how bad is it going to be? Am I going to be grounded for the weekend or a month? Wide range. All right, last one here. Given the tight end position is so thin at the top, there's no way I would trade Kyle Pitts for Deebo Samuel straight up.
I wouldn't either.
And this was about a trade. I can't remember if it was executed or just discussed. And the idea was basically you have to go really high at wide receiver to even consider, just because of the drop off. And Kyle Pitts, he's coming on late. He's been viable pretty much the whole year. It hasn't been overly pretty at times, but it's so thin, right? I mean, that's why the insulation factor of Pitts is high. It's not really the age thing. It's just the fact of, you say, what are the drop-offs going to be like for guys like Kelsey and Waller? Kittle has been up and down during his career. People have a lot of, wanting more from him, whether it's durability or consistency or whatever. But there's not a lot of just bank it type options. I mean, we talked about Gronkowski, right, a few weeks ago, of just like, wow, this guy's a hammer throw, but we don't even know if he's going to play next year. I mean, you have 5 or 6 guys where you're like, I'm really glad I have them, but they have a lot of risk compared to Kyle Pitts' profile.
Yeah, and I think you have an elite possibility at the tight end position. There's only really, the difference between 1 and 4 at that position is pretty massive, right? When you look outside of the top 6, we talked about that at running back, it's very much the same at tight end. You just look at the difference between, if you turn 5 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns into 7 or 8, right? That makes an enormous difference at the tight end position in terms
Is he
of.
still stuck on one? Is he still stuck on 1 touchdown?
I think so. I think that's about where it was. Yeah,
that is wild.
right. But if you look at 50 catches, 500 yards, and 5 touchdowns versus 8 touchdowns or 9 touchdowns with that line, it's a massive difference at the tight end position, right? Just because they're so close together in that range. When you get an elite guy, I think they can really make a difference. So I would be on the Pitt side of this. And again, you take shots at elite guys. That's what's so interesting about this upcoming off season. I think just almost by definition, whoever is going to be cheaper out of Waller or Kelsey is going to have to be a buy, because they're probably going to be the last guy that can make a huge difference at the tight end position, even in a short sample, because they're probably going to go at the end of that Andrews, Pitts, Kittle range of the position, right up in the top 5 or so.
You think you think Kelsey's going to be down to tight end 4 or 5 in spots or at times?
I mean, it's whoever's going to be the end of that tier would right. Sort of be my thought. I think you'll get people that are, oh, look, he's old, right? We could sort of debate.
Well, yeah, there'll be 3 or 4 teams in a startup that really just won't take him or won't look to take him, period, pretty much.
Totally. I mean, I think when you sort of look, I think there's a really good argument for Andrews over him. I think there's a good argument for Pitts over him. I think there's probably a good argument for Kittle over him. And then you sort of get, whoever, and let's just put those 5 in a tier. Whoever's the cheapest one of those 5 is the target, right? Whoever, and you throw Waller in there with Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, and Pitts. And Andrews and Pitts are going to be the 2 cheapest ones. So it's going to be one of those other 3. Whoever that is going to be a glaring target. Because they're going to be the end of what I think is a tier that has a really high upside. We haven't seen it out of guys like Fant and Hawkinson and some of the rest of those guys. Goddard might be in that tier too.
Yeah, and I think Kelsey, he's reaching an age point where very acquired taste. And if you buy in a startup, then if you look to exit, it's going to be a pretty small market. And it's going to be a pretty selective time of year, per se. It's probably going to be a team that doesn't have a tight end, doesn't feel comfortable, but yet they are contending. They might want to buy later in the season. It's a really small window. And that is, even for an all-timer, you're talking next kickoff, 32.9 years old. And you have to view them now probably on a 2-year window and reassess as you go. And it could end up being, within 12 months or on a 1-year window of just sort of like, if there's any erosion, the problem with the age and, assuming eliteness is, man, if Kelsey is like tight end 6 next year, that's like a catastrophic drop for his age. So that's the risk factor, and why, kind of talking through this, it makes sense Kelsey would be, not the assumed tight end 1 or 2 off the board and closer to 4 or 5, somewhere in that zone. But I agree with you that there's going to be that real demarcation of you've been there, done that, or you have shown eliteness versus you have not.
Right. I think Goddard would be an interesting guy, sort of where he fits in that range. Whoever,
taking the next guy to kick off that next giant amalgam
could be a 4-round difference.
Right. Well, it could be 3
forever.
guys. Right. Some people might say that the next grouping is 3 players. Some might say it's 9. Right. So that's the problem. And totally. Neither one is technically wrong.
Right. Totally. And I actually think that Kelsey play, that's actually a play I like to execute later on in the off season, in terms of like, I'll do that in my August startup drafts, right? When I kind of know it can be really tough to pair a contending window drafting in January,
yeah,
right. But if I'm doing that in August, I sort of have access to a lot more information, situational
because drafting Kelsey, you can't do the whole, well, this year didn't really work out. There is no,
it's
this
gotta
year
work out, right?
The first year, this year, the one right in front of me has to work out,
right?
Because if it doesn't, that's a train wreck startup pick or acquisition in January, February.
Totally. And you have to know there's other things that go along with that you kind of have to know. For example, you want to know, if you're going to make that pick, if you can pair him with Brady, right? Because they're in a similar window, right? Because you can sort of get an elite ceiling out of Brady at a cheaper cost for your quarterback, right? You can sort of do that, right? And make them a pair in terms of your targeting. You might not know that, January 12th when you're making a Kelsey pick, but August 12th, we have a whole different debate. The other thing there we know is some situational running backs, some key situations that we don't know now that we would be able to pair with Kelsey later on. I think that Kelsey play, that specific tight end play, aging guy in a contending window, I think that makes sense later on in the offseason when you have more information. And there's we could go through a whole list of things that we don't know that would help us sort of make those decisions and put a contending team in. And I'll tell you, the teams that I drafted that are competing in year one, they're all the teams I drafted late in the offseason because I had that information and was willing to sort of push those buttons more so than I can in January. It's just tough to do that.
And also know the pivot, which is someone else takes Kelsey. What if their season doesn't go well? Kelsey is absolutely going to be one of the maybe 2 or 3 players they're looking to offload in season when they are not looking like the playoffs, or if Kelsey gets injured early in the year and then they go to 2-5 or something. So just know that you would be on the opposite end of the market of, well, now I'm a buyer.
Right.
I'm a buyer and I don't have to pay the January, February full freight. And yet I'm still getting in here for the critical back half of the season. Maybe my tight ends aren't providing as much pop as I expected. I can just go buy the relief pitcher that's going to come in flamethrow the 9th inning and hopefully get me to the championship. And that could be Kelsey when you didn't have to hold him and take that risk on for 8-9 months. So that's the other thing of assuming, and that's one thing that I used to assume in a startup draft or a rookie draft or whatever. If you don't get a guy, I always used to have this feeling of well, that was my best chance. And it really isn't. I mean, just by addressing it anytime they get injured, a little stretch of bad production, or the team just goes in a different team direction, all those things can prevent secondary windows to accumulate shares. And on the low end side, if you miss out on your sleepers or injury away backs that you really wanted or whatever, they might hit the wire. Yeah. So you just got to keep your eyes open, and that whole portfolio mentality of well, I have 8 teams and I have them in 2 teams that I really like, but maybe you end up with 3 or 4, by the time you get to next November. It's not a perfect line.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. If there's a tight end that's active right now, and we say that, hey, that there's a tight end right now that's active in the NFL that produces the best tight end season ever, who would be your bet to be that person?
Rob Gronkowski, because he did it, or he already did it.
In the future, right? The best.
So in the future, surpassing the best we've ever seen.
Right.
It's a real short list. I'll say that.
Right.
I mean, I guess it had. Yeah.
I mean, is it the top 5 that we mentioned? Is it's got to be
that? Yeah, I think that's the list. I mean, I don't think
could Goddard get there. I don't think so.
I don't think. Now I'm thinking about quarterbacks. You need the perfect storm with a quarterback too. And the problem is a lot of these don't really have the perfect combination that I want to actually say this.
Right.
And I think Kelsey is a little too far gone to actually project historic greatness at his age.
Right.
He can be really, really, really good. He could be tight end 1 for a season, but that's still not the best ever.
Right.
Pitts, I like Matt Ryan, but I don't know if that's the perfect combination per se. George Kittle is certainly not the perfect combination. Mark Andrews, same thing. So that's the real thing, is none of them have the super optimal quarterback pairing that would really give me confidence to say one of them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because the formula, just to close on this, I mean, the formula is typically strong quarterback, ideally top 8 in the NFL, but top 16 is sort of the minimum. And then you want a weak wide receiver 1, like someone that's actually masquerading as a wide receiver 1. So the tight end is actually the wide receiver 1. Good example, Mark Andrews. Good example, George Kittle, for a good stretch, maybe not this year per se, but yeah, Darren Waller, same sort of thing. It's a very common. So good enough quarterback, ideally great, and then weaker wide receiver core. That's the formula there. And we'll see with Kyle Pitts. That might be a pretty good formula next year if they roll back Matt Ryan, and we'll see about Calvin Ridley's status.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts for folks heading into championship week here?
I mean, just enjoy it. I mean, listen, this is the week where I actually pay attention. Like you, I pay a little bit more attention, a little bit more box score scouting. It's lesser of them, so it's lesser stress, I guess, volume of things to watch anyways. And then just get on the bike and ride when you're in the, you know, during the Dallas game. I just was riding my bike and just trying to burn off all
Trying
that
to
energy that I
will
was
your
going
team to victory. Will
Just
your team
pow-
to
just powering
600
along,
total
yeah.
yards for Dallas.
Right. Get
You know,
some exercise, blow off some steam, stay healthy. That's the goal.
One final story. I remember there was some big NBA playoff game years and years ago when I was like traveling. I was at a hotel or something. I walked on the treadmill the entire game. I was like, well, if I'm here, I might as well just stay walking.
Right.
It was a workout.
Right.
It was a workout.
Calves of steel. You look like Phil Mickelson by the time you were done. Yeah.
Right. All right. In this episode, we discussed a lot about macro trading, and teaser, more to come in the off season here in Dynasty about team building, about trading, and about profiles. We talked a lot about Ronald Jones, injury rate running backs, Terry McLaurin, Waddle as a profile, Amon-Ra St. Brown, among others. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.